Hi, so before moving forward towards more interesting stuff like object-oriented Python and functions in Python and other stuff, I just wanted to take a moment and explain what list comprehension is because we have already discussed for loops and other Python statements like if conditions and while loops, and this topic is kind of related to all of them. So that's why I wanted to take a second and explain this list comprehension. So let's get started, or let's get straight into the meat. So suppose you have a string with the variable name myString, and which is equal to some silly thing like word. And you want to create a list out of it. You want to just store each separate element in a list, W as a separate element, O as a separate R, and D all as a separate element. So how you can do that? Well, it's pretty simple. You can create a list by the name of my list and make it empty, and then create a for loop by as for letter in my string colon my list dot append this letter to my list. If you press shift and enter and then look at this my list, you will find out each letter as a separate element of this my list. Now you can do, like this is a pretty lengthy way of doing things. You can do this in just one line by using the list comprehension. So that would be my list is equal to square brackets. And now whatever you write inside these square brackets is list comprehension. So what you can do is just copy and paste this same for loop, leaving behind this colon. So it's the same thing as saying for every letter in my string. What you should do, you should append this letter. And if I press shift and enter and then look at my list, you would see that the same thing. But it's just easy and compact way of doing things. So what is list comprehension? List comprehension is comprehending everything in one line. So this is pretty easy way of doing things. Like the list comprehension is just a compact way of writing your code. Suppose here you wrote everything in 3 lines, but here you just wrote down the same thing in 1 line. It's less readable than this one. So wherever you want to list comprehension, you will sacrifice your readability. Now the choice is yours. If you are not worried that much about your code readability, but you are worried about the space it's taking, you can just use the list comprehension instead of for loop. Overall, the performance wise or the computation time wise, both works the same way. Now you would say that, okay, we can do simple things like appending things to the list with list comprehension. But what about doing some more complex things? Like suppose we have a list like lst and its contents are num4, num in range. And if you are not familiar with this range, I will link a video down in the description which will fully explain what range is. So you can just look it out and have it understand what list is. Now this will create a list having the elements or ranging the elements from 0 to 10. Now this is pretty simple, appending each element of this list. What about if you just want to append the square of this number? So you can just copy and paste the entire thing, add 2 stars in front of the num which says I want to find out the square of this number, and press shift and enter and then check out the list. You will see that we will be having all of the numbers ranging from 0 to 10, but all of the numbers would be squared in a list. Anyway, you would say that, okay, we can do squares, we can do simple things. What about if condition? Can we write if condition inside this list comprehension? And I would say yes, why not? We will remove this square from this number And we'll just say if num modulus 2 is equal to 0, then store the number. What that means is if the number is even, store it to the list. If it's not, don't store it. If I press shift and enter and then check out the list, you would see that we'll be just having even numbers in this list. Okay, so far we understood how can we create how can we create a list with list comprehension. How can we do a little bit more complex things, which is finding out the square of a number and then storing the number in the list. And then we did a little bit more complex thing, and that was adding an if condition. If you are worried about what this would look like with a for loop, let's do it with a for loop. So that would be for number in range this. We'll add a colon right over here. Then we'll shift this to the next line and add another colon, press enter, and then at the end we'll write list dot append number. Press shift and enter, and if you check out the list, it would be the same thing. So this thing is equivalent to this thing. Now the choice is yours. If you are worried about the readability of your code, like, you should be kind to your future self. Suppose you come back like after 1 month and you look at this one line, you would scratch your head and say what this giant line does or what this thing does, you know? So like, if you're using this list comprehension, it's a bit more difficult. Like suppose if you're working with another partner in a team on one project and you just write 1000 one-liners. So he would scratch his head and he would not be able to understand what this whole thing does. And instead, if you use this for loop, like the readability would be really nice. People would understand your code really easy and everything would be okay. But these one-liners would ruin your life in long term. Like if you come after 1 month or so, you would forget about what this was or why did that, if you're not that much expert in list comprehension. I would not recommend using way too much complex list comprehensions, but if you're willing to go with it, you can. It will take some time to get your head around these list comprehensions, but you will indeed get around it. Anyway, let's do one more example and we'll wrap the video there. So suppose you have a list of temperatures in Celsius. That would be a list, and that list would be 32.0, 50.0, 68, and something like this. And now you want to find out the equivalent temperatures in Fahrenheit. So if you're willing to do it with for loop, what you do, you will create another list by the name of Fahrenheit and make it equal to an empty list. And then you will write a for loop, and that would be for temp in Celsius, append the temperature to Fahrenheit, but not directly. First, find out the temperature in Fahrenheit. And for finding the temperature in Fahrenheit, we have formula which is 9 divided by 5 multiplied with temperature in Celsius and add it with 32. Now we want to append this, and that would be dot append. And if I press shift and enter and check out the Fahrenheit, you would see that we have temperatures in Fahrenheit. Now, if you're willing to do the same thing with list comprehension, so we do have this Celsius and Fahrenheit, and we'll just copy this line, and we'll just copy this formula and we'll wrap it in one more bracket so that we don't mess things up. So what these brackets means is first perform this division, then this multiplication, and then this addition. and then a for loop for temp in Celsius. And that's pretty much it. If I press shift and enter and then check out the Fahrenheit, you will see that the answer is the same. So now the choice completely depends on you. If you're willing to sacrifice the readability and go with compact code and less code, you can just use this list comprehension. And if you are not that much worried about the compactness of your code, you can just use this for loop, which is a little bit more code, but more readable and more understandable. And this way you are more kind to your future self. So this is pretty much it for this video. I hope you did learn about list comprehension. If there was something I left, just leave a comment down below and I will surely answer all of your questions. So till next time, enjoy hacking, stay cheeky breaky, and peace out.